The dust cloud appeared on the horizon just after noon, and Quinn Dalton knew trouble when he saw it, but when the rider came close enough to see, trouble looked nothing like he expected, wearing a burgundy riding skirt and sitting astride a limping chestnut mare. He set down the fence post he had been about to hammer into the dry Wyoming soil and wiped his brow with the back of his hand. The August heat of 1883 made the air shimmer like water, and for a moment he wondered if the whole thing was a mirage. But no, the horse was definitely favoring its left front leg, and the woman atop it was leaning forward in the saddle like she had been riding for days. Quinn walked toward the edge of his property, shading his eyes against the relentless sun. His ranch sat about 5 miles outside of Concord, Wyoming, a modest spread he had built with his own 2 hands over the past 4 years. At 26, he had more calluses than coin, but he owned every acre fair and square, and that meant something out here where most men drifted like tumbleweeds. The woman pulled up about 20 feet away, and even through the dust coating her face, Quinn could see she was younger than he first thought, maybe 22 or 23, with dark auburn hair escaping from beneath a practical felt hat. Her eyes, a striking shade of green, met his with a mixture of exhaustion and wariness. "Afternoon," she called out, her voice hoarse. "My horse threw a shoe about 3 miles back. Is there somewhere she can rest? Just an hour, maybe, then we will be on our way." Quinn approached slowly, keeping his movements measured. The mare's coat was dark with sweat, and foam gathered at the corners of her mouth. Her left front hoof was indeed bare, and from the way she held it, Quinn suspected more than just a missing shoe. "An hour might not be enough," he said, keeping his tone gentle. "That leg looks tender. May I?" The woman hesitated, then nodded. Quinn moved to the mare's side, running his hand down her shoulder before crouching to examine the hoof. The frog was bruised and heat radiated from the entire leg. He straightened, meeting the woman's eyes. "She has got some inflammation. Probably been compensating for the lost shoe for a while. If you push her another mile, you might lame her permanently." The woman's jaw tightened, and Quinn saw real fear flicker across her face before she mastered it. "How long, then?" "A few days at least, maybe a week if we are careful." "I do not have a week." Her voice was barely above a whisper, and she glanced over her shoulder at the empty horizon behind her. Quinn followed her gaze. "Someone following you?" "No, yes, maybe." She closed her eyes briefly. "I do not know any more." He should have sent her on her way. A woman alone with troubles was the last thing a bachelor rancher needed. But something in the set of her shoulders, the way she held herself despite obvious exhaustion, made him think of his own sister back in Missouri, the one he had not been able to protect when their father's gambling debts came due. "Come on down," he said. "We will get your mare settled, and you can tell me what you are running from." "I did not say I was running. Did not have to." She studied him for a long moment, and Quinn let her look. He knew what she would see. A tall man, weathered by sun and work, with brown hair that needed cutting and gray eyes that had seen their share of hard winters. He wore no gun belt, had left that life behind 3 years ago, and his hands showed honest work. Whatever she saw must have satisfied something, because she swung down from the saddle with a grace that spoke of long practice. On the ground, she stood about 5.5 feet, and the dust could not quite hide the quality of her riding clothes. Not wealthy, but not poor either. "Josephine Parker," she said, not offering her hand. "Quinn Dalton. This is my place." She looked past him at the half-built fence, the sturdy barn, and the small but solid house about 100 yards distant. "You work it alone. Got a ranch hand who comes 3 days a week. Otherwise, yes." Josephine nodded, then turned her attention back to her horse, running her hand down the mare's neck with obvious affection. "Her name is Clementine. She has carried me a long way. I can see that. Quinn took the reins she had not quite offered. Let us get her into the barn. I have got a good liniment that should help with that inflammation. As they walked toward the barn, Clementine limping between them, Quinn noticed how Josephine kept scanning the horizon. Whatever or whoever she was running from had her spooked good and proper. The barn was dim and blessedly cool after the harsh sunlight. Quinn led Clementine into a wide stall with fresh straw and a water trough. The mare dropped her head immediately, drinking in long, grateful pulls. "Easy now," Josephine murmured, her hand on the horse's shoulder. "Not too much at once." Quinn found himself watching the way she gentled the animal, her movements sure and practiced. Most women he knew could ride, but few had this kind of natural horsemanship. "You work with horses?" he asked, fetching the liniment from his tack room. "My father bred them. I grew up in the saddle." Past tense, he noted. Quinn crouched beside Clementine again, and this time the mare let him lift her injured leg without fuss. As he worked the liniment into the tender tissue, he kept his voice casual. "You heading somewhere particular or just away?" "West. I have a cousin in Sacramento." "Or I did last I heard. We have not corresponded in 3 years." "That is a long way on a lame horse, I know." Frustration leaked into her voice. "But I cannot go back." Quinn finished with the hoof and stood, wiping his hands on a rag. "Your business is your own. But if someone is likely to come looking for you here, I should know about it." Josephine met his eyes, and he saw her weighing what to tell him. Finally, she sighed. "My father died 6 months ago. Heart gave out. He left debts, substantial ones. The ranch went to pay them, but it was not enough. And someone wants the rest from you. A man named Vernon Whitlock. He held most of my father's markers. He said he would forgive the debt if I married him." The disgust in her voice was palpable. "He is 53 years old and has buried 2 wives already." Quinn felt anger stir in his gut. "So you ran?" "3 weeks ago. He has men, not particularly nice ones. I have been keeping to small towns, sleeping in boarding houses when I could, camping when I could not. I thought I had lost them, but in Laramie I saw one of them. Or I thought I did. Maybe I am just tired and seeing threats everywhere." She looked it, now that Quinn paid attention. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and beneath the dust her face was drawn with exhaustion. "When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, I think. I had some jerky." "Come on." He started for the barn door. "You need food and rest. Clementine will be fine here." Josephine hesitated. "I cannot pay you. I have maybe $5 left." Did not ask for payment. "Why are you helping me?" Quinn paused, considering the question. "Because someone should have helped my sister when she needed it, and nobody did. Because it is the right thing to do. Because I have got an empty house and more beans and bacon than one man needs. Pick whichever reason suits you." Something in her expression softened. "Thank you." "Save your thanks until you taste my cooking." The house was simple, but clean. One large room that served as kitchen and living area, with 2 smaller bedrooms off to one side. Quinn had built the second bedroom thinking his sister might come west eventually, though that hope had faded after her letters stopped coming. He stirred up the fire in the stove and set water to boil while Josephine stood awkwardly by the door, clearly uncertain of the etiquette for this situation. "You can wash up if you like," Quinn said, nodding toward the basin and pitcher on the side table. "I will get some food together." "I should not stay in the house. The barn would be fine." "The barn is for horses. You are not a horse." Despite herself, Josephine smiled, just a quick flash, but it transformed her face entirely, chasing away the hunted look. "Your neighbors might talk." "My nearest neighbor is 4 miles away. And old Silas Harper does not care what anyone does as long as they leave his sheep alone." Quinn pulled out flour, lard, and the sourdough starter he kept going year-round. While Josephine washed 3 weeks of dust from her hands and face, he mixed up a quick batch of biscuits and set them in the oven, then sliced bacon into the skillet. The familiar rhythm of cooking settled his thoughts. When he glanced over, Josephine had removed her hat, revealing hair that probably looked magnificent when it was not tangled and dust-coated. She caught him looking and quickly turned her attention to the window. "You have a nice view," she said. "Gets pretty in the evening when the sun hits the mountains." They fell into silence, but it was not quite uncomfortable. Quinn scrambled eggs to go with the bacon, and when the biscuits were done, he piled everything onto 2 tin plates and set them on the rough pine table he had made the first winter. Josephine ate like someone who had forgotten what food was, then caught herself and slowed down, color rising in her cheeks. "I apologize. That was unladylike. You were hungry. Nothing wrong with that." She took a more measured bite of biscuit and her eyes widened slightly. "You can actually cook. Do not sound so surprised. A man alone either learns to cook or starves. My father never learned. After my mother died, we ate a lot of burned stew." There was affection in her voice despite the words. "When did you lose her?" "I was 12. Influenza took her. My father never quite recovered. I think that is why he made such poor business decisions later. His heart was not in it anymore." Quinn understood that kind of grief. His own mother had died giving birth to his youngest brother, who followed her 3 days later. Some losses carved out pieces of you that never quite grew back. They finished eating in a silence that had grown more comfortable, and Quinn made coffee while Josephine looked around the house with obvious curiosity. "You built this yourself?" she asked. "Every board and nail." "Took me a year, working between everything else that needed doing. It is not fancy, but it keeps the rain out. It is good work, honest work." She turned to face him. "What did you do before ranching?" Quinn poured coffee into 2 cups, considering how to answer. "Different things. Worked cattle drives. Did some scouting for the Army. Spent a year as a deputy down in Colorado." "Why did you leave?" "Because men kept dying, and I got tired of deciding who lived and who did not. Out here, the only thing I have to worry about is whether it rains enough and if the cattle stay healthy." Josephine accepted the coffee he offered, wrapping her hands around the warm cup despite the heat of the day. "That sounds peaceful." "It is. Most days." She smiled again, and Quinn found himself wanting to see that expression more often. There was something about this woman, a strength beneath the exhaustion, a determination that resonated with something in his own nature. "You should rest," he said. "Take the bedroom on the left. I will check on Clementine and finish that fence. I cannot take your bed. It is the spare room. I will use my own." Josephine looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. "Just for a little while, then I should ride on. Your horse needs rest, even if you do not think you do. Give it at least until tomorrow morning." She finally nodded, setting down her empty coffee cup. "Thank you, Quinn, for everything." After she disappeared into the bedroom, Quinn stood for a moment, listening to the silence of his house. It had been a long time since he had shared his space with anyone, and longer still since that someone had been a woman. He told himself he was just being neighborly, doing what any decent person would do. But when he went back outside to work on the fence, he found his thoughts drifting back to green eyes and a smile that chased away shadows. The sun was lower in the sky when Quinn heard the bedroom door open. He had finished the fence and was working in the barn, brushing down his own gelding when Josephine appeared in the doorway. Her hair was neater now, rebraided and pinned, though she still wore the same dusty traveling clothes. "Clementine looks better," she observed, leaning against the stall door. Quinn glanced at the mare, who was contentedly eating hay. "The rest helped, but she still needs more time. That hoof will not heal overnight." Josephine nodded, resignation clear in her expression. I slept longer than I meant to. It must be nearly evening, about 4 hours. You needed it. I had dreams I was being chased. Woke up 3 times certain someone was in the room. She tried to smile, but it did not quite work. I suppose that will pass eventually. Quinn set aside the brush and leaned against the stall partition. This Vernon Whitlock, how hard is he likely to look for you? Hard enough. He is not a man who accepts being told no. His pride will not allow it, if nothing else. What about the law? Josephine laughed, but there was no humor in it. Vernon owns the sheriff in our county, and the debts are real, legally speaking. He would argue that I am running from my obligations. Your father's debts died with him. You would think so. But there are ways to tie a daughter to her father's promises, especially when money changes hands in the right places. She crossed her arms, looking suddenly vulnerable. I know I cannot run forever, but I thought if I could reach California, maybe I could disappear, start over with a new name. The plan had holes big enough to drive cattle through, but Quinn kept that observation to himself. You ever think about standing and fighting instead? With what? I have $5 and a lame horse. Vernon has money, men, and the law on his side. You have got yourself. That counts for something. Josephine met his eyes, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of kindred spirits who had both learned that the world did not always play fair. I should keep moving, she said, but the words lacked conviction. Stay, Quinn heard himself say. At least until your horse is sound. Maybe longer if you want. Why would you offer that? Good question. Quinn searched for an answer that made sense. I could use help around here. The ranch hand I mentioned, he is 60 years old and his back gives him trouble. Having someone who knows horses would be useful. You could earn your keep, save some money for California. It was not entirely a lie. He could use help, but he knew his real reason ran deeper than practical considerations. Something about Josephine Parker had worked its way under his skin in the space of a few hours, and the thought of watching her ride away tomorrow made his chest tighten in a way he did not fully understand. That would not be proper, Josephine said, but he could hear the temptation in her voice. Neither is a 53-year-old man forcing a woman half his age into marriage. Sometimes proper is overrated. She was quiet for a long moment, weighing her options. Finally, she said, if your neighbors talk, if anyone comes asking questions, I leave immediately. I will not bring trouble to your door. Fair enough. And I work for my keep, no charity. Agreed. Josephine stuck out her hand, and this time Quinn shook it. Her grip was firm, her palm calloused from riding. The contact lasted a moment longer than strictly necessary, and when they pulled apart, Quinn saw color rise in her cheeks. Should we discuss wages? She asked. All business now. Room and board plus $5 a week. More if the work is particularly hard. That is generous. It is fair. They fell into an easy routine over the next few days. Josephine proved herself capable with everything from mucking stalls to mending tack. She had an eye for horses that impressed even Quinn, who had been working with livestock for most of his life. She could spot a developing problem before it became serious, and had a gentle way with even the most fractious animals. His gelding, Thunder, who barely tolerated Quinn some days, would follow Josephine around like a puppy. You are making me look bad, Quinn told her on the third morning as he watched Thunder nuzzle Josephine's shoulder while she brushed him. He just needed someone to talk to him properly, she replied, grinning. You treat him like he is a piece of equipment. He is a horse. He has feelings. He is livestock. You are impossible. But Quinn found himself smiling as he walked away. The house felt different with Josephine in it, more alive somehow. She sang sometimes while she worked, old folk songs in a clear alto that carried across the yard. She cooked with more skill than he did, and the meals they shared had become something he looked forward to more than he cared to admit. On the fifth day, old Silas Harper stopped by with eggs from his hens. The sheepherder was a taciturn man who rarely said more than a dozen words at a time, but his pale blue eyes took in everything. "Got yourself some help," he observed, nodding toward where Josephine was working with one of the young horses in the corral. "Temporary," Quinn said. "Her horse threw a shoe. She is staying until it heals." Silas watched Josephine for a moment. "That girl knows her way around a horse. She does. Pretty too." Quinn shot him a look, and Silas's weather-beaten face crinkled into what might have been a smile. "No law against noticing," the old man said. "She running from something. That is her business. Fair enough." Silas handed over the eggs. "If she is staying a while, might want to get her some proper clothes for ranch work. That riding skirt will not hold up long." After Silas left, Quinn found himself thinking about the observation. Josephine had been washing out her only change of clothes every other night, and they were showing the wear of hard travel and harder work. That evening, after dinner, he brought up the subject carefully. "There is a general store in Concord. I need to pick up supplies tomorrow. You could come along, get some things you need." Josephine looked down at her plate. "I have $5, and I owe you 5 more for the week's work. Plus, I need to pay for your labor anyway. Having proper working clothes counts as a business expense." "Quinn, before you argue, consider that I am being purely selfish. If you tear that skirt on barbed wire, I will feel guilty, and guilt makes me irritable." She laughed as he had hoped she would. "That is a terrible argument, but effective, maybe." She studied him across the table. "You have been very kind to me, more than I had any right to expect. You have earned your keep, more than earned it actually. I have gotten more work done this week than in the previous month." That was true. With Josephine handling the horses and helping with the daily chores, Quinn had been able to focus on bigger projects, repairs that had been waiting for months, improvements he had been putting off. But more than that, he found he worked harder when she was there, driven by some inexplicable desire to impress her. The next morning, they hitched Quinn's wagon and made the 5-mile journey to Concord. The town was small, maybe 300 people, with a main street that boasted a general store, a bank, a hotel, 2 saloons, and the requisite church. Quinn did not come to town often, preferring his own company to crowds, but today the trip felt different with Josephine beside him on the wagon seat. She had gone quiet as they approached the town, and Quinn noticed her scanning the street carefully before they descended from the wagon. "It is all right," he said quietly. "I will be right beside you." The general store smelled of leather and tobacco, and the peppermints the owner kept in a jar by the register. Mrs. Patterson, who ran the place with her husband, looked up from her account book and did not quite hide her surprise at seeing Quinn with a woman. "Good morning, Quinn," she said, her eyes already calculating everything they could about Josephine. "This is a surprise." "Morning, Margaret. This is Miss Parker. She is helping out at the ranch for a while. She needs some working clothes." Mrs. Patterson's expression shifted to something more welcoming. "Of course. Right this way, dear." While Josephine looked at fabric and ready-made clothes with Mrs. Patterson, Quinn gathered his own supplies: flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition, and the other staples that kept a ranch running. He tried not to listen too closely to the women's conversation, but caught fragments anyway. "How long have you known Quinn?" "Just over a week." "He is a good man. Keeps to himself mostly, but honest as the day is long. We were all glad when he settled here. Brings a better element to the area, if you know what I mean." Quinn felt his ears grow warm and focused intently on selecting the right gauge of wire. When they finished shopping, Quinn insisted on paying for 2 work dresses, a split riding skirt, and some basic necessities over Josephine's protests. They loaded the parcels into the wagon and were about to leave when a man stepped out of the saloon directly into their path. He was in his 30s with a hard face and a gun belt worn low and tied down, his eyes fixed on Josephine with an intensity that made Quinn's instincts flare. "Afternoon," the man said, his gaze never leaving Josephine's face. "You look familiar. You traveling through?" "Just visiting friends," Josephine said, her voice steady despite the tension Quinn could feel radiating from her. "Funny thing, I am looking for someone. Young woman, auburn hair, traveling alone. There is a reward for information." Quinn stepped slightly in front of Josephine. "The lady said she is visiting friends. Is there something else you need?" The man finally looked at Quinn, assessing him with the practiced eye of someone who had sized up plenty of men before. Whatever he saw made him reconsider his approach. No offense meant, just doing a job. He tipped his hat, but his smile did not reach his eyes. "Enjoy your visit." They did not speak until they were a mile out of town. Then Josephine said quietly, "That was one of Whitlock's men, I am sure of it." "Does he know you?" "I do not think so. We never met directly." "But he is looking, and if he asks the right questions in town, Mrs. Patterson will tell him I am at your ranch." Quinn considered this. "Then we will be ready." "I should leave tonight. I can take Clementine. Your horse is not ready and neither are you. We will handle this." "How?" "Good question." Quinn did not have a ready answer, but he knew running was not it. That man would follow, and on the open road, Josephine would be vulnerable. At least at the ranch, they had walls and preparation. That night, Quinn cleaned his rifle and the old Colt revolver he had not worn in 3 years. Josephine watched from the doorway, her arms crossed. "I thought you left that life behind," she said. "I did, but I will not let anyone take you against your will. Vernon will say the law is on his side. Then the law is wrong." Josephine crossed the room and sat across from him at the table. "I am not worth you getting hurt over." Quinn looked up from the gun, meeting her eyes. "Let me be the judge of that." Something shifted in her expression, surprise, perhaps, or the beginning of understanding. "Why does this matter so much to you? You barely know me." "Maybe that is true. Or maybe a week of working beside someone, seeing how they treat animals and handle themselves, tells you more than years of casual acquaintance." He set down the gun. "You are strong, Josephine, stronger than you think. You have been running because it seemed like the only option, but there are others." "Like what?" "Like standing your ground. Like building a life somewhere that bastard cannot touch you." "Here, you mean, if you want." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Josephine looked away first, color rising in her cheeks. "You are offering me a job, that is all." "Is that all?" She stood abruptly. "I should check on Clementine." Quinn let her go, mentally cursing himself. Too much, too soon. She was running from one man trying to control her life. The last thing she needed was another man pushing his own agenda. But as he sat alone in the gathering darkness, he could not deny the truth anymore. Somewhere in the past week, Josephine Parker had become more than just a woman who needed help. She had become important in a way that had nothing to do with charity or neighborly kindness, and everything to do with the way his heart lifted when she smiled. The way her voice singing while she worked made the whole ranch feel like home. He was falling in love with her, and he had no idea what to do about it. 2 days passed without incident. The man from town did not appear, and Quinn started to hope he had moved on. But on the 3rd evening, as the sun painted the mountains gold and crimson, dust rose on the road from Concord. 3 riders. Quinn was in the barn when he spotted them, and he immediately went to find Josephine. She was in the corral with one of the horses, and he did not have to say anything. She saw his face and knew. How many? 3. Could be innocent travelers, but probably not. She looked toward the house. Your rifle is there. Yes, you know how to shoot, my father taught me. Get inside, bar the door. If shooting starts, stay low and away from windows. Josephine grabbed his arm as he turned to go. Quinn, I know, I will be careful. He watched her run to the house, then turned to face the approaching riders. He had left his gun belt in the house, a decision he now regretted, but he refused to meet them armed. Not unless they forced the issue. The 3 men reined up about 20 feet away. The one in the middle was the man from town. The other 2 were older, harder looking, with the weathered faces of men who spent their lives on the wrong side of the law. Evening, the middle man said. Name is Carson. We met in Concord the other day. I remember. What can I do for you? I think you know. The woman staying with you, we need to speak with her. About what? That is between us and her. Quinn crossed his arms. She does not want to speak with you. See, that is where we have a problem. Carson leaned forward in his saddle. My employer has a legal claim. The lady owes a debt, and he is prepared to be generous about it. By forcing her into marriage, that is generous. That is between them. Step aside and nobody needs to get hurt. No, the word hung in the evening air. One of the other men, a grizzled character with a scar across his cheek, spat tobacco juice and said, You are making a mistake, friend. I have made worse. Carson sighed like this was all very tedious. We could do this the hard way, but I would rather not. Mr. Whitlock sent me to collect the lady and settle this business peacefully. But if you insist on interfering, well, we are prepared for that too. Quinn heard the house door open behind him. He did not turn, but he knew Josephine had come out. This does not concern you, Quinn, she called. Let them talk to me. Get back inside. I will not have you hurt on my account. Josephine, but she was already walking past him, her chin high, her green eyes blazing. She stopped a few feet in front of Quinn, facing the 3 men. I am not going back, she said clearly. Tell Vernon he can take his debt and his proposal and rot with them. Carson shook his head. Cannot do that, miss. Mr. Whitlock was real clear about his expectations. Then you will have to drag me, and I promise you it will not be easy. The scarred man chuckled. Girl has spirit. But spirit only takes you so far. That was when Quinn moved, stepping between Josephine and the riders. You have got your answer, time to leave. Or what? Carson's hand drifted toward his gun. You are not even armed. Does not mean I cannot hurt you. For a long moment, nobody moved. Then hoofbeats sounded from the direction of Silas Harper's property, and another rider appeared. Old Silas himself, with his ancient rifle across his saddle and a look on his weathered face that said he would use it if necessary. Problem here, Quinn? The old sheepherder asked mildly. Nothing I cannot handle. Looks like you could use some help anyway. Silas positioned his horse so the 3 men would have to split their attention. Evening, gentlemen. This is private property and you are not welcome. Carson's jaw tightened. This is not your concern, old man. Maybe not, but I have known Quinn here for 4 years and he has helped me more times than I can count. Figure I owe him. Silas worked the lever on his rifle, chambering around. Besides, I do not like bullies, never have. The mathematics had changed. 3 against 1 was acceptable odds for men like these. 3 against 2, with one of them armed and the other between them and their target, was another matter. And there was something in Quinn's eyes, some cold promise of violence that made Carson recalculate his approach. This is not over, Carson said finally. Mr. Whitlock does not give up easy. Neither do I. Carson wheeled his horse and his companions followed. They rode back toward Concord at a canter, and Quinn watched until they disappeared from sight. Josephine let out a breath she had apparently been holding. Thank you, both of you, Silas shrugged. Like I said, I do not like bullies, Plus, anyone who can get Thunder to behave is worth protecting. Despite the tension, Quinn found himself smiling. "Stay for dinner, Silas. It is the least we can offer. Would not say no to that." Over a meal of stew and fresh bread that Josephine had made that afternoon, they discussed the situation. Silas was a man of few words, but when he spoke, people listened. "They will be back," he said. "3 men means whoever sent them thinks this is worth money. They will not give up just because you stared them down once." "I know," Quinn said. "The question is what to do about it. Could go to the law." Josephine shook her head. "Vernon owns the sheriff in Nebraska." "I do not know about Wyoming, but I would rather not risk it." "What about proof?" Silas asked. "Can you prove these debts are not yours?" "My father signed papers. I saw them after he died." "Loans, yes, but also contracts that somehow included me as surety." "I am not sure how legal they actually are, but a judge sympathetic to Vernon might uphold them anyway." Silas chewed thoughtfully. "Then you need to make sure no judge sees them, or get yourself beyond this man's reach permanently." "Marriage," Quinn said quietly. Both Josephine and Silas looked at him. "If she is married to someone else, she cannot be forced to marry this Vernon character," Quinn continued, working through the idea as he spoke. "And her husband would have legal authority over any debts, could contest them in court without her being directly involved." "That is true," Silas said slowly. "But finding someone willing to marry a stranger just to protect her, that is asking a lot." Quinn met Josephine's eyes across the table. "I will do it." Josephine's eyes went wide. "Quinn, no, I cannot ask that of you. You did not ask. I am offering. But marriage that is permanent, you would be tying yourself to me just to solve my problem. That is not fair to you. Let me worry about what is fair to me." Silas stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I should go. Let you two discuss this. But for what it is worth, I think it is a good plan. Only way to be sure, legally speaking." After Silas left, the house felt very quiet. Josephine had not moved from her chair, and Quinn could see her mind working, considering angles and implications. "This is insane," she said finally. "Maybe. You barely know me. I know enough. What if I am a terrible wife? What if I snore, or I am cruel, or I spend all your money?" "Do you?" "No, but that is not the point. You would be gambling your entire future on a week's acquaintance." Quinn leaned back in his chair, choosing his words carefully. "Here is what I know about you, Josephine Parker. You are kind to animals and good with your hands. You sing when you work. You do not complain even when the job is hard. You stand up to bullies even when you are terrified. And when you smile, really smile, it feels like the sun coming out." Color flooded her cheeks. "Quinn, I also know that I like having you here. That this house felt empty before you came and will feel empty again if you leave. That when I think about the future, I find myself imagining you in it. That is not love. That is loneliness. Maybe it started that way, but it is not that anymore, and I think you know it." Josephine stood abruptly, pacing to the window. She stared out at the darkening landscape for a long moment before speaking. "What if I do not love you back? Then we will work on it. Or we will not, and we will be business partners who happen to be married. I will take that risk." "Why?" "Because the alternative is watching you run until one of those men catches you, and I cannot do that." She turned to face him, and in the lamplight, her eyes shone with unshed tears. "You deserve better than a marriage of convenience to a woman with nothing to offer." Quinn crossed to her, stopping just close enough that he could see the flecks of gold in her green eyes. "Let me decide what I deserve, and for the record, you have plenty to offer, more than you think. I do not even know if I can love anyone. After watching my father grieve my mother for 10 years, seeing what that kind of love cost him, I am not sure I want to risk it." "That is fair. But maybe we could try anyway, see what happens." Josephine searched his face looking for something. "You are serious about this?" "Completely. If we do this, if we actually go through with this, I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If you meet someone else, someone you actually love, you tell me. We can end this, find a way. I will not trap you in a loveless marriage just to save myself." Quinn took her hands, feeling the calluses on her palms, the strength in her fingers. "I promise, but I do not think that is going to be a problem." She looked at their joined hands, then back at his face. "All right, all right, all right, I will marry you. God help us both." Quinn felt something loosen in his chest, a tension he had not realized he was carrying. "We should do it soon, before those men come back with reinforcements. Tomorrow. They stood there in the lamplight, hands joined, and Quinn had the sudden urge to kiss her, but he held back. She had agreed to marry him out of necessity, not love, and he would not push for more than she was ready to give. That did not stop him from hoping, though. The next morning, they rode to Concord in Quinn's wagon, both dressed in their best clothes, which in Quinn's case was a clean shirt, and his only pair of pants without patches, and in Josephine's case was the burgundy traveling suit she had arrived in, cleaned and mended. The minister was a young man named Reverend Samuels, who looked between them with barely concealed curiosity, but did not ask questions when Quinn explained they wanted to be married that day. "I should counsel you both first," Reverend Samuel said. "Marriage is a sacred covenant not to be entered into lightly." "We understand," Josephine said, "and we are certain, very well, I will need witnesses." Silas had agreed to stand up for them, and Mrs. Patterson from the general store served as the second witness, her eyes bright with romantic speculation that Quinn knew was entirely misplaced. They stood in the small church with the morning sun streaming through plain glass windows, and Quinn listened to the minister's words with a strange sense of unreality. "Do you, Quinn Dalton, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" "I do." The minister turned to Josephine. "And do you, Josephine Parker, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Josephine's voice was steady. "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by the Wyoming territory and in the sight of God, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Quinn hesitated, unsure, but Josephine leaned up and pressed a quick, chaste kiss to his lips. It was over in a second, but Quinn felt the warmth of it down to his toes. They signed the register, making it legal and binding. Josephine's hand shook slightly as she wrote her new name, Josephine Dalton. Quinn added his signature below hers, and just like that, they were married. Mrs. Patterson hugged them both, already talking about a celebration dinner. Silas shook Quinn's hand with unusual solemnity and told Josephine, "You could have done worse." On the ride back to the ranch, their ranch now, Quinn supposed they were mostly quiet. Finally, Josephine said, "I suppose this makes me a rancher's wife." "Suppose so." "I have no idea how to be a rancher's wife. You were already doing most of it. Now it is just official." She smiled at that, and some of the tension eased. "This is going to take some getting used to." "We will figure it out." When they pulled up to the house, Josephine climbed down from the wagon before Quinn could help her, then stood looking at the building like she was seeing it for the first time. "It is a good house," she said. "Solid. We can make improvements if you want. Add a room, maybe. Paint, curtains, whatever you think it needs." "It needs nothing. It is perfect as it is." She turned to him. "Thank you, Quinn, for doing this. I know it is not what you planned for your life. Plans change, mostly for the better in my experience." That night, Quinn insisted Josephine take the larger bedroom, their bedroom now, he supposed, though he had no intention of imposing on her that way. He would sleep in the spare room until and unless she indicated otherwise. But as he lay in the narrow bed, staring at the ceiling, he could hear her moving around in the next room, and his mind would not settle. He had married a virtual stranger today, bound himself to her legally and before God. It should have felt reckless, maybe even frightening. Instead, it felt right in a way Quinn could not fully explain. The next few weeks fell into a new kind of rhythm. They worked the ranch together during the day, falling into an easy partnership that felt like they had been doing it for years rather than weeks. Josephine's presence transformed the place. She planted a small garden near the house, coaxing vegetables from the stubborn Wyoming soil. She organized the barn with ruthless efficiency, creating a system that made everything easier to find. She even convinced Quinn to build a proper chicken coop, and suddenly they had fresh eggs every morning. At night, they ate dinner together and talked about the day's work, about their pasts, about dreams and plans for the future. Quinn learned that Josephine could play the piano, though she had not touched one in years, that she spoke passable French because her mother had insisted on lessons, that she was terrified of spiders but would walk up to a 1,000-pound horse without fear. Josephine learned that Quinn had wanted to be a school teacher when he was young, before poverty and circumstance pushed him into harder work, that he loved reading but rarely allowed himself the time for it, that he had a scar on his left shoulder from a bullet that had ended his career as a deputy, and he considered it a blessing rather than a tragedy. Slowly, carefully, they were building something. Not quite the marriage Quinn had imagined when he was younger. There was no passion, no declarations of love, but something solid and real nonetheless. Then one night, about a month after their wedding, everything changed. They had finished dinner and were sitting on the porch, watching the stars emerge in the vast Wyoming sky. It was Josephine's favorite time of day, and Quinn had taken to joining her there, content to sit in companionable silence. "Can I ask you something?" Josephine said suddenly. "Of course." "Do you regret it, marrying me?" Quinn turned to look at her, surprised. "Why would you think that? Because you sleep in the spare room. Because you barely touch me, even casually. Because sometimes I catch you watching me with this look on your face like you are trying to figure something out." "Josephine, I am not complaining," she said quickly. "You have been nothing but respectful. I just need to know if you wish things were different." Quinn took a breath, choosing his words carefully. "I sleep in the spare room because I did not want to pressure you. You married me out of necessity, not choice. I figured you needed space, time to adjust, and the rest of it. I do not touch you because I am afraid if I start, I will not want to stop, and that look you have seen. That is me trying to figure out how I got lucky enough to have you here, wondering when you will realize you could have done better." Josephine was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood and held out her hand. "Come with me." Quinn let her pull him to his feet, and she led him inside through the main room to the door of the larger bedroom. She stopped there, still holding his hand, and looked up at him. "This is our room," she said. "Not my room, ours. I want you to sleep here with me." Quinn's heart hammered against his ribs. "Are you sure?" "I am tired of dancing around what this is. We are married. Maybe we started for practical reasons, but it has become more than that, at least for me. If it is not the same for you, tell me now." Instead of answering with words, Quinn cupped her face in his hands and kissed her. Not the chaste brush of lips from their wedding, but a real kiss, deep and searching and full of all the wanting he had been holding back for weeks. Josephine made a small sound of surprise, then melted into him, her arms coming up around his neck. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, her eyes were bright. "So that is a yes?" she asked, a smile playing at her lips. "That is a yes." That night, Quinn learned that Josephine had a small birthmark on her right shoulder blade, that she laughed when he kissed the curve of her neck, and that she fit against him like she had been made for exactly that purpose. They fell asleep tangled together, and for the first time since she had arrived, Quinn did not dream of her leaving. The next morning brought rain rare and precious in Wyoming, and they stayed inside, lounging in a way Quinn had not allowed himself in years. Josephine made coffee while Quinn built up the fire, and they sat together watching water stream down the windows. "I should check on the animals," Quinn said without much conviction. "In a minute." Josephine curled closer, her head on his shoulder. "This is nice." "It is." "I never thought I would have this," she said quietly. "After my father died, after Vernon started hounding me, I thought maybe I was not meant for happiness, that I would spend my whole life running or trapped." Quinn pressed a kiss to her hair. "You are not trapped." "No, but I am staying." She tilted her head to look at him. "Not because I have to, because I want to." "Good. Because I was not planning on letting you go anyway." They spent the day in contented laziness, something neither of them had experienced in far too long. But as evening approached, bringing a messenger from town, young Billy Henderson, who worked at the post office, rode up with a telegram in his weatherproof satchel. "Wire for Quinn Dalton," he called, and Quinn went out to meet him, pulling on his coat against the rain. The telegram was from the sheriff in Concord, terse and to the point. 3 men asking questions about new bride. Claimed legal right to her. Held them off but cannot do so long. Come to town. Urgent. Quinn read it twice, then looked up at the rain-soaked sky. The reprieve was over. He showed the telegram to Josephine, who read it with a carefully blank expression. "So it is happening. We knew it might. What do? We go to town. We tell the truth. And if that does not work, we find another way." They rode to Concord the next morning, the road still muddy from rain. Sheriff Thomas Wickham was a solid man in his 50s, with iron gray hair and the kind of face that gave nothing away. He invited them into his office with a courtesy that did not quite hide his skepticism. "Mr. Dalton." "Mrs. Dalton." He nodded to each of them. "Thank you for coming. We have a situation." "So your telegram said." 3 men arrived 2 days ago claiming Mrs. Dalton is wanted in Nebraska. They have papers legitimate-looking ones saying she owes a substantial debt to a Mr. Vernon Whitlock, and that she ran out on a marriage contract. "There was no marriage contract," Josephine said firmly. "Vernon wanted to marry me to settle my father's debts. I refused. According to these papers, your father signed an agreement on your behalf. My father was dying. Vernon took advantage of a sick man." The sheriff tapped the papers on his desk. "I believe you, Mrs. Dalton, but believing you and being able to do anything about it are different things. These documents look legal, and the men have a court order from Nebraska requiring your return." "She is married to me now," Quinn said. "That changes the situation." "Does it? They are claiming the marriage is fraudulent, entered into specifically to avoid the debt." "It is not fraudulent. We are legally married." "I know. Reverend Samuels confirmed it, but they are arguing the intent matters." The sheriff sighed. "Look, I sent them away yesterday, said I needed to verify facts, but they will be back, probably with a judge's order from here. If that happens, my hands are tied." Quinn felt frustration building. "So what do you suggest? Prove the debt is fraudulent, or prove you two were married for legitimate reasons, not just to escape legal obligations?" "How do we prove intent?" Josephine asked. "That is the question." The sheriff studied them both. "Do you have any correspondence before the marriage? Any witnesses who can testify to a prior relationship?" They looked at each other, and Quinn saw his own frustration reflected in Josephine's eyes. "No. We met less than 2 weeks before we married." then you have got a problem. They left the sheriff's office with no better solutions than when they arrived. Walking down Concord's Main Street, Quinn was acutely aware of people watching them. Word had spread, as it always did in small towns, and everyone wanted to see the outcome of this drama. "We could run," Josephine said quietly. "Head for California like I originally planned. They would follow, and next time they might not bother with the law. Then what?" Quinn stopped walking, an idea forming. "We prove the marriage is real." "How?" "By living like a real married couple. By showing everyone in Concord that this is not a sham. By making it so obvious that we are together that no judge could possibly believe otherwise." Josephine's eyes searched his face. "You mean make a show of it?" "I mean stop hiding. Stop being careful. Let everyone see that we are married and that it means something." A smile slowly spread across her face. "You want to court me in public after we are already married? Is that so strange?" "It is backwards. So is everything else about us. Why change now?" So they did exactly that. Over the next 2 weeks, Quinn and Josephine became fixtures in Concord. They attended church on Sunday, sitting together in the pew with Quinn's arm around her shoulders. They shopped at the general store, picking out fabric for new curtains together with the easy familiarity of a long married couple. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, where Quinn held her hand across the table and made her laugh, and every day their connection deepened. What had started as a performance became genuine, and Quinn found himself falling more deeply in love with his wife with each passing day. One evening, they were walking back to their wagon after dinner when they encountered Carson and his 2 companions outside the saloon. The men were clearly frustrated, their plans stymied by the sheriff's refusal to simply hand over Josephine. "Enjoying yourselves?" Carson called out, his voice edged with anger. "We are," Quinn replied evenly. "Nice evening. Must be convenient playing house while you figure out your next move." "We are not playing anything. We are married." The scarred man spat into the street. "Marriage of convenience. Everyone knows it. You took her in, married her to protect her from her obligations. That does not make it real." Josephine stepped forward before Quinn could respond. "You want to know if it is real? Fine. I love him. I did not at first, but I do now. And I am staying here with my husband on our ranch. You can tell Vernon Whitlock that he can take his papers and his court orders and go straight to hell." The vehemence in her voice surprised even Quinn. Carson's jaw tightened. "Mr. Whitlock does not give up." "Neither do we," Quinn said. "And unlike you, we have the law on our side. Sheriff Wickham has made it clear you have no grounds to take my wife anywhere. So I suggest you head back to Nebraska and tell your employer to find another way to recoup his losses." For a moment, violence hung in the air. Then Carson seemed to deflate slightly. "This is not over." "Yeah, you keep saying that. Getting old." The 3 men walked away, and Quinn felt Josephine trembling beside him. He pulled her close. "You all right? I am tired of being afraid, tired of looking over my shoulder, I know. But I meant what I said about loving you." Quinn turned her to face him, right there in the middle of Main Street with half the town watching. "You sure about that?" "Completely sure." He kissed her then, long and thorough, and heard a few scandalized gasps and a couple of cheers from the saloon. When they broke apart, Josephine was smiling. "That should convince any remaining doubters," she said. "That was not for them. That was for us." They drove home under a canopy of stars, Josephine tucked against Quinn's side. The ranch looked welcoming in the moonlight, lights glowing from the windows that Josephine had started leaving lit when they went to town. "This feels like home now," she said as they approached. "I did not think anywhere would ever feel like home again after my father died. It is home." "Your home for as long as you want it." "Forever then." The word hung between them, full of promise. Quinn helped her down from the wagon and they walked inside together. Later, lying in bed with Josephine asleep in his arms, Quinn thought about how strange life was. A month and a half ago, he had been alone, content with his solitude. Now he could not imagine going back to that emptiness. A week later, Sheriff Wickham sent word that Carson and his companions had left Wyoming. A follow-up telegram from Nebraska indicated that Vernon Whitlock had withdrawn his claim, finding it not worth the expense and embarrassment of pursuing a woman who had married someone else. When Quinn told Josephine, she sat down hard in one of the kitchen chairs. "It is really over. It is really over. I cannot believe it. I have been running for so long, I do not know what it feels like to stop." Quinn pulled her to her feet and into his arms. "Then I guess you will have to learn." They did learn together. The seasons turned, summer fading into autumn and then the hard Wyoming winter. Quinn taught Josephine to ice skate on the frozen creek, and she taught him to make her mother's apple pie recipe. They expanded the ranch, buying additional land and more cattle. Silas Harper became a regular dinner guest, and slowly, other neighbors began stopping by as well. In the spring, Josephine discovered she was pregnant. She told Quinn on a warm April morning, her eyes bright with equal parts joy and fear. "Are you happy about it?" she asked. Quinn picked her up and spun her around, which was answer enough. But he said it anyway. "I could not be happier." Their son was born in December during a snowstorm, with Josephine's doctor snowed in and only Quinn and Mrs. Patterson to help with the delivery. He came into the world hollering, with his mother's auburn hair and his father's gray eyes. They named him Thomas, after Josephine's father, and he was followed 2 years later by a daughter they called Clara, and 3 years after that by another son, James. The house expanded to accommodate them, rooms added with care and attention. The ranch prospered, becoming one of the most successful in the area. But more than the physical growth, Quinn watched his family grow in love and laughter. He watched Josephine bloom into the woman she was always meant to be, strong, confident, and so deeply loved that she never again feared being alone. He taught his sons to ride and his daughter to be fearless, and he kissed his wife every morning and every night without fail. On their 10th anniversary, they rode out to the spot where Josephine had first appeared on the horizon, her horse limping and her future uncertain. They dismounted and stood looking back at their ranch in the distance, 3 children playing in the yard and a life built together stretching out behind them. "You remember what you said that first day?" Josephine asked. "I said a lot of things that first day. You said an hour might not be enough, that my horse needed more time." Quinn smiled. "And you said you did not have a week. I am glad I stayed." "Me too." Josephine turned to him, and even after 10 years the sight of her still made his heart lift. "I asked to rest my horse for 1 hour. You convinced me to rest here forever. Best decision I ever made." "Second best," she corrected. "The best was when I said yes." They kissed as the afternoon sun painted the Wyoming landscape gold, their children's distant laughter carried on the wind. The ranch that had been Quinn's refuge had become their shared legacy, and the woman who had come asking for an hour had given him a lifetime. In the years that followed, their family continued to grow and flourish. Thomas proved to have his mother's way with horses and eventually took over that aspect of the ranch. Clara inherited her father's steady determination and her mother's fierce love, becoming a teacher in Concord and later marrying the doctor's son. James, the youngest, had a wanderlust that took him as far as San Francisco before he returned home, bringing with him a wife and tales of the wider world. Quinn and Josephine grew old together, their hair turning silver but their love remaining constant. They added a porch swing where they spent summer evenings, watching grandchildren play in the yard where their own children had played before. The ranch passed to Thomas, who ran it with the same care and attention his father had taught him. On the morning of their 40th anniversary, Quinn woke to find Josephine already awake, watching the sunrise through their bedroom window. He moved to sit beside her, taking her hand. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "Everything. All of this." She gestured at the room, the house, the life they had built. "Sometimes I can hardly believe it is real, that we are real. We are real. More real than anything. I was so scared that first day, so certain that my life was over, that I would spend whatever time I had left running or trapped. And instead, I found everything I never knew I wanted." She turned to him, her green eyes still bright despite the years. "I found home, I found love, I found you." Quinn kissed her then, as he had kissed her countless times over 40 years, and it still felt like the first time, still held that spark of wonder that someone like Josephine Parker had walked into his life and decided to stay. That afternoon, their children and grandchildren gathered for a celebration dinner. The house overflowed with family and laughter, with stories and memories, and the kind of joy that comes from being deeply, truly loved. Silas Harper was there too, ancient now but still sharp as a tack, regaling the grandchildren with embellished stories of the old days. As the evening wound down and the family began to depart, Quinn and Josephine stood on the porch, waving goodbye. When the last wagon had disappeared down the road, they remained there, wrapped in each other's arms. "This is what it is all about, is it not?" Josephine said softly. "These moments, this family, this life we built together, it is everything." They stood there as the stars emerged one by one, and Quinn thought about how a single decision to help a stranger, to offer shelter, to take a chance on something improbable had led to all of this. He had convinced Josephine to stay 40 years ago, thinking he was saving her. But in truth, they had saved each other. Years continued to pass, each one adding new stories to their family history. Quinn taught his grandchildren to work the land as his father had taught him, and Josephine passed down her mother's recipes and her father's love of horses. They attended weddings and births, weathered losses and celebrated triumphs, always together, always each other's constant support. When Quinn was 70, a bad winter brought pneumonia that nearly took him. Josephine nursed him through it with the same fierce determination she brought to everything else, refusing to let him go. When he recovered, he held her close and whispered, "Not yet. We still have time." And they did. Another 8 years of mornings waking up together, evenings on the porch swing, quiet moments of contentment that made up a life well lived. Their love, which had begun as an act of desperation and grown into something solid and real, had withstood everything life threw at them. One spring morning, when Quinn was 78 and Josephine 75, they rode out to their special spot one last time. The ranch had passed fully to their children now, though Quinn still consulted on major decisions, and Josephine still kept a garden that was the envy of the county. They stood where they had stood so many times before, looking at the view that never quite got old. Josephine leaned into Quinn's side and he wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. "You have any regrets?" she asked. "Not a single one. You? Only that I did not stay that first hour. That I wasted even a moment arguing when I could have been here with you." Quinn laughed, the sound carrying across the open land. "We made up for lost time. That we did." They stood there until the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. And then they rode home together, as they had done thousands of times before. Home to the house Quinn had built and Josephine had filled with love. Home to the life they had created together, one day at a time, one choice at a time, one moment of love at a time. The woman who had asked to rest her horse for 1 hour had indeed stayed forever, and in doing so, had given Quinn Dalton the greatest gift he could imagine: a lifetime of love, a family to call his own, and the knowledge that he had made a difference in at least one person's life. And Josephine, who had been running from one future, had found another far better than anything she could have imagined. She had found a partner, a home, and a love that lasted not just until the obstacles were overcome, but through every ordinary day that followed. Their story became legend in Concord, Wyoming, the tale of the woman who came asking for an hour and stayed a lifetime, and the cowboy who convinced her that sometimes the best adventures are the ones that lead you home. It was told at weddings and birthdays, passed down through generations as a reminder that love can bloom in the most unexpected places, and that sometimes the best decisions are the ones that seem reckless at the time. Quinn and Josephine Dalton lived out their days in contentment and peace, surrounded by family and sustained by a love that had proven stronger than fear, doubt, or the passage of time. They had built something lasting not just in wood and land, but in hearts and memories, in the family that carried their legacy forward and the love story that inspired everyone who heard it. When Quinn finally passed at the age of 82, with Josephine holding his hand and their children surrounding them, his last words were, "Thank you for staying." And Josephine, her eyes bright with tears but her voice steady, replied, "Thank you for asking." She lived another 3 years, spending them with her family, tending her garden and keeping Quinn's memory alive through stories and laughter. When her time came, she went peacefully in her sleep, and those who found her said she wore a smile, as if she was already with Quinn again. They were buried side by side on a hill overlooking the ranch, their graves marked with simple stones that bore their names and a single inscription: "She asked for an hour. He gave her forever." The ranch continued through their descendants, generation after generation, each one learning the story of how it all began. And on warm summer evenings, when the sun painted the mountains gold and the wind whispered through the grass, some said you could still see two figures on horseback, riding together across land they loved, bound by a promise that transcended death itself. It was a love story that began with desperation and grew into devotion, that started with necessity and blossomed into the kind of partnership that sustained two people through every challenge life could offer. It was imperfect and unconventional, but it was theirs, and it was real, and it was everything. The end.